All right. Don't expect too much. That's the message coming in from Ambassador. Professor Swaran Singh, would you agree? Would you agree that this perhaps is just merely a photo op, and anything that had to be discussed has been discussed already with China? This is essentially to show to the world that we are uniting and we are keeping our enemies closer to us at a time when the West is looking down on us.
I think let me begin by complimenting and agreeing with Ambassador Bora. As far as cutting the T's and dotting the I's, officials definitely have worked on it for several months, and they have done it, of course. But when it comes to giving strategic direction as to where you want bureaucrats to go in coming months and years, that is what happens when two national leaders meet face to face, sometime in closed door meetings, sometime in delegation level conversations. And I am expecting that to happen in terms of where they wish to take that relationship. You would remember in Kazan in October last year when they met, that marked a U-turn in the relationship, and the normalization process has begun. Several initiatives are in process. They will take time to fructify. It's not an easy relationship. But from that October, now more recently, particularly last 3 months or so, Trump's tariffs and the whole tension in India-United States relationship, which of course Beijing has all the reasons to celebrate, to wean India away from United States, have accelerated that process for sure. And if you remember, India's interest in Shanghai Cooperation Organization was very little.
Right.
India was the host of Shanghai Cooperation Organization in 2023 when it ultimately ended up a short meeting online. And next year, of course, Pakistan was to host it. They hosted the Council of Heads of Government, Heads of State met in Kazakhstan. So it's a coming back of Shanghai Cooperation Organization where Russian president for the first time is able to exit his nation, join such a multilateral meeting. Indian Prime Minister is going there with entire enthusiasm and so on. So first of all, the multilateral organization called Shanghai Cooperation Organization itself is getting certain amount of energy. That's point number one. And SCO clearly sends a signal to Western nations as to how these countries can provide an alternative, can stand on their own. And they keep saying we are alternatives, we are different from Western countries, but we are not anti-Western. Number two, I think this is also going to showcase us a trilateral meeting of President Putin, President Xi Jinping, and Prime Minister Modi, rekindling again. They've met twice in June of 2018, and since then they have not met. Now they are meeting again. And now this time, China and Russia already have a no limits partnership, and now they see India joining in that trilateral, which again is symbolic. I'm not saying world is going to change tomorrow night, but it's very symbolic. And then finally, in that context is the bilateral, where I'm expecting at least some announcements to come from this bilateral meeting. Maybe the flights are to be resumed.
Okay.
Or if I'm too optimistic, maybe informal summit meetings are revived. So we don't know at what level optimism will be met, but I think definitely there's going to be a positive momentum and acceleration of that positive momentum. And I think in that sense, when national leaders meet, it does make a difference to me. The bureaucracy will make sure that they are pursuing things that the national leaders want them to do, and they know it better. They know in advance what is going to happen sometimes. But national leaders meeting is sometimes very, very important event to happen with full of potential. Sometimes it can even be groundbreaking. I'm not saying this time it is going to be groundbreaking, but it can really showcase enormous change in the relationship.
Enormous change and enormous strength, at least for Beijing right now. Diplomacy is never reactive. So perhaps Prime Minister's visit to China has nothing to do with Donald Trump's tariff. I think it's a fair point, Professor Swaran Singh. It's a fair point. Would Prime Minister have visited China for SCO meeting had Trump not imposed tariffs? Perhaps yes. Perhaps this was already in making because India is looking to better its relationship with China, and this has been long time coming now. But I have to ask you, to what extent do you think it has something to do with Trump tariffs? And if at all, do you think Donald Trump is now going to think twice over about the 25% penalty that he's imposed on India, because India is actively looking for partners. Let's at least agree on the fact that India is now actively looking for partners for our $60 billion worth of products about 2/3 of our total exports to the US, which will be impacted as a result of that 50% penalty. So to what extent do you think perhaps the US is now going to go back to the drawing room and think on whether it wants to go ahead with that heavy penalty?
See, if you look at the track record of President Donald Trump, I wouldn't be surprised on his going back. He's done that back and forth with several other cases. He's been putting pause, he's been raising tariffs, reducing them. All kinds of surprise elements are always there. But whether those tariffs are contributing to ensuring Prime Minister Modi's visit to China, uh, obviously Ambassador Bohra will vouch me when I say Prime Ministers of India, when they travel abroad, it's not just one reason that makes them go where they are going, for how many days they are going, when they are going. There are several reasons put together
Right.
that make a journey like this happen. But what is significant here is the perception. I mean, I am an outsider. I will never know how much tariffs contributed to the decision that Prime Minister will go to Tianjin. But perception outside cannot be denied, correlates that there is a correlation in sudden, sort of ratcheting up of that relationship by Donald Trump vis-a-vis Prime Minister. Now we are even hearing the German newspaper authenticated by New York Times saying 4 to 5 times President Trump has been trying to reach out to speak to Prime Minister Modi, and that has not happened so far. And in that sense, it's not easy to not see the connection, at least in terms of perceptions, that this hike in tension has definitely contributed. I'm not saying this is a singular reason, but has definitely contributed. And the fact that United States and President Trump himself particularly, both in first term and now, sees China as his most formidable systemic challenge.
Right.
And if you look at one of the largest countries, largest population country, fourth largest economy, which is a friend of United States, is seen getting closer to China, it's not going to be not noticed in the United States. President Trump is going to take note of what happens tomorrow between these two leaders. Moreover, Beijing would love to see India is wheeled away from the United States. And I agree with Mr. Bohra, despite these sort of tariffs, which are going to impact about, as you mentioned, $60 billion worth of India's exports, it's a very large, wide and deep relationship in so many sectors that India shares with the United States that may not, hit the headlines right now. Headlines are made of tariff rise and Russian oil being the reason, etc., etc. But the
So there is, if not fear, then mistrust. I stand corrected.
That's right.
I
No, you
stand
don't
corrected
stand corrected.
on that.
Fear
But
unki
before
taraf hai, meri taraf nahi.
but before I let you both go, Professor Swaran Singh, something that you're going to be eyeing very, very closely tomorrow, coming out perhaps of a bilateral conversation between Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi, what would that be? What would you be eyeing?
I think, let me first say that it is a well-known saying in diplomacy that there are no permanent friends, there are only permanent interests. And when it comes to China and India, history makes it more complicated than it appears on the face value when you see photo opportunities being used. As far as tomorrow is concerned, I think some of the statements would happen at bilateral level. Some of the understanding that arrives tomorrow will be showcased in trilateral and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization final declaration. At the bilateral, I am hoping some announcement on direct flights could be a possibility. There could be also a certain indication of early harvest, which Chinese leaders are now using as an expression to de-escalation on the border, what
Right.
that implies and how that will be implemented on the ground. And I keep saying if I have to be extremely optimist, I hope that informal summit meetings between these two leaders are revived.
All right. All right. Thank you for putting that in perspective. It's going to be a crucial 2-day SCO that we're going to be